Hi, my name is Fatima Goss-Graves, and I'm the president and CEO of the National Women's Law Center. At the National Women's Law Center, we fight for gender justice in the courts, in public policy, and in our society, especially for women and girls who face the greatest brunt of injustice in our country. And this year, I am so very proud to support the Latinx House's panel on the Janes, which will play in the U.S. documentary competition section at the 2022 Sundance Film Festival. This important film covers the story of women in the 1960s and the early 1970s in Chicago who called themselves the Janes. These women led a service supporting women in seeking safe and affordable abortions that were also, and unfortunately, illegal. This resistance work was an act of love. And over the last 5 decades, the National Women's Law Center has fought for gender justice over the range of issues that affect the lives of women and girls. And including among these issues is reproductive health and justice and access to abortion care. It's why we're so especially honored to join the Latinx House to support this panel. The Latinx House is a nonprofit initiative that aims to change the image of the Latinx community by elevating and amplifying the voices and content created by Latinx artists, entertainers, policy experts, grassroots organizers, and as many of you know, my friend and partner for all things good and board member at the Law Center, Mónica Ramírez, is one of the co-founders of the Latinx House. Mónica will moderate this panel and will be joined by Janes directors Tia Lessin and Emily Pildes to lead a conversation on the state of reproductive rights in this country and why conversations in films like this are so very critical for our community. I hope this panel provides an opportunity for you to reshape your understanding of the nuances and realities of reproductive health care at a time when access to it feels so very deeply fragile. Thanks for watching.
Well, thank you everyone for joining us. Fatima, thanks so much for being our partner in this work and in co-hosting this panel. We have the great fortune of having the co-directors of the Janes, Emma Pildes and Tia Lessin, here with us today to talk about this amazing film. I was so blown away when I watched it, and we're going to dig in so that you can learn more about how this film was made. And we're going to talk a little bit about why it is so relevant and why you all need to watch it. Before we jump into that, for those who are watching, who are part of the fight today, we thank you, we honor you, and this film is going to, I think, be really helpful to everyone as we think about this issue, abortion, reproductive health, reproductive justice. And I'm just honored to be here with you, Emma and Tia, to talk about your brilliant movie.
Thanks so much for having us, Mónica. We're so grateful to have this time with you.
Of course. And, you know, some people might say the Latinx House, why is the Latinx House hosting this conversation? Well, this is an issue that affects Latinas, and in particular, not just the issue of abortion, but the issue of reproductive health and rights overall. And we're going to talk a little bit about that today, but I think for those who are familiar with the Latinx House and the work that we're doing on representation, we have to remember that this is a priority issue for our community. We are not a single issue community, and this is certainly one of them that we need to talk about and educate ourselves and our community about. So Emma and Tia, will you introduce yourselves? How did you become filmmakers?
I've been working as a producer for many, many years at this point, producing a lot of films for HBO, along with Susan Lacey and Jessica Levin, and at PBS's American Masters before that. I happened into documentary film, you know, it was in the realm of the things that appealed to me when I was spit out into the world after college. And it ended up, you know, being the internship that I got, and it just ticked every box for me right away. And I never strayed from it after that. But it's just a very gratifying thing to be doing. It's creative, and it's, you know, it's activist oriented if you use it correctly. And it always felt really powerful. I'm sure I'll say this again, but it always felt like a really powerful tool that I believed in from the start to be able to put people in other people's shoes. and put people in rooms that they wouldn't be able to be in otherwise, and give people perspective on other people's experiences, just seemed so such a righteous pursuit.
Thank you. And Tia, what about you?
Well, I came into it sort of in a odd way. I was a labor organizer for several years, and that was really hard work. And one day, a BBC crew came to film the campaign I was working on, and I was really interested to see, what kind of impact it could make, and they raised the profile of the campaign, and I thought, wow, I guess I was sort of more interested in that, aspect of the struggle, and being able to, amplify the voices of folks that are on the ground organizing for justice. So that's how I came into filmmaking. And I moved to New York and began working in TV and film. I made a film in 2000 about garment workers in Saipan who were being trafficked. My grandmother was a garment worker in New York City, and I was really touched by those stories. And I knew, one of the things she was most proud of was having a pension from the ILGWU. She was a card carrying. That was the story that really profoundly moved me. And I was privileged to tell that. I told a different story after Katrina, the film Trouble the Water, which is a story about another story about resistance, about survival, not just when Katrina hit, but before, during, and after. And that film got nominated for an Academy Award. And in between those films, I worked a lot with different filmmakers, Michael Moore, principally on his films Fahrenheit 9/11 and Bowling for Columbine, and just have been really moved to see how, the power of films to reach audiences, far and wide, and to engage people in conversation and action.
I love the idea of film as a righteous tool, and I love sort of the idea that you can use film to both make movements and record movements, right? So that is so powerful. I'd love to know, for the audience, because I've seen the film, I'd love for Emma, why don't you share a little bit about the Janes? And congratulations to both of you. It is a huge deal that you are with the film at Sundance this year. So many congrats. But why don't you give a little bit of background about the Janes?
It's about a group of women in the late 60s and early 70s in Chicago that started an underground abortion service, so it's a pre-Roe story. It's a, Tia and I like to say it's a cautionary tale. It's about what they went through and sort of, their call to action, because the laws were the way they were in our country at that time. And it's set against the backdrop of Chicago, fortunately for us, which was such a rich background that it became sort of a character in and of itself in the film. There's so much duality going on, good and evil afoot in that city at that time, and so much organizing, student movements, civil rights movements, a lot of which, these Janes were born out of and learned to organize in. But there was also, the Chicago police and Mayor Daley, and, so it was just a very exciting time with a lot of turmoil to be in that city, which is the city I grew up in. And it's just the story of these women that, felt like they had to make change because nobody else was, and people were dying. So.
Yeah. And, you are both accomplished filmmakers. There are millions of stories that you could tell and probably that you want to tell. How did you arrive at the decision to tell this story and the story of the Jains, Tia?
I think a lot of us are curious about what, things are going to look like. We're on the precipice of the Supreme Court potentially overturning Roe v. Wade, if not that, increasing the restrictions to access for abortions. I don't think we have to, guess about that. We lived through a time, our mothers and grandmothers lived through a time when abortion was illegal in this country, pre-Roe v. Wade. And so I think principally this film, we want to transport viewers to a time when abortion was illegal, to see what the consequences were for women. When abortion is illegal, it doesn't mean women don't have abortions. Women have unsafe abortions. Women have abortions that put themselves, and their health at risk, and especially, and disproportionately impacting poor women, women of color, rural women, who aren't near the city, can't easily access abortion care. So to me, this was a lens, to see our future. It's our past, but it's potentially our future. Also, I think, there's just inherent drama in the story of a bunch of women going underground, breaking the law, using their privilege, because many of them are most of them are white, middle-class women, but using their privilege to try to ensure that women have options, that women who made the decisions to end their pregnancies had a way to do it that was safe, that was affordable.
So Emma, Tia's sharing sort of this historical context and, sort of the opportunity to look forward while also looking back. And I'm wondering if, as you were making this movie, the context in the United States around reproductive justice was changing, right? We had the battle in Texas, and so many things were actually changing in real time. Did that impact the way that you decided to approach the film as you were conducting the interviews and even some of the editing choices that were made?
I don't think it affected the editorial choices or the storytelling choices, because we were very we continued to talk about it, which is important, but we were very set on making this a historical story that speaks for itself. We don't know how long this fight is going to go on. We don't know, we might be safe this year, but not in 5 years from now. So we didn't want to anchor it in 2021. We wanted to be able to continue to have this as a resource to go back to say, this is what it looks like. Make no mistake, women are dying, women are still having abortions, women are, people are organizing around it. So I think we were very committed to doing it that way because we felt like that was the strongest possible approach. But what I will say is we were certainly feeling the clock, and anxious to get this out. There were markers all the way through, whether it was Kennedy resigning, who certainly was a conservative, but was keeping the court sort of somewhat in balance, or Kavanaugh, or just Trump in general, and the idea that he was going to pack the courts. RBG dying happened on a day that we were filming interviews, and we got the news. So all the way through, there has been terrifying chipping away at, and us getting a little bit closer to what's starting to feel like the inevitable, although I like to be a hopeful person. So that definitely lit a fire under us to get this out and get these women's stories out, if not changing the filmmaking and storytelling itself.
The film doesn't anchor itself in this moment. It anchors itself in a historical moment, but it's impossible to watch the film without noticing that it's in dialogue with where we're at right now. That we were certainly informed as filmmakers by what was happening in this world. It's impossible not to be. And I think for sure audiences will be impacted by that as well.
I want to follow this line, Tia, of where you were going, because you have shown through the film just this incredible cast of characters, all of whom were working together, sometimes at odds, etc., to be the undergird of this movement, right? And in particular in Chicago. And some of the activists are still activists, right? They're still on the streets trying to make change, like Heather Booth. What are some of the, when you reflect on the film, what are some of the things that you think are similar to what you have depicted in your film, to what is happening today? And what are you hope are some of the moments of instruction for those who are going to be watching?
Women, middle class, upper class, wealthy women, mainly white women, were able to access abortion care much more easily than other women. They had networks. They were able to pay for airplane tickets to London or Japan or Mexico. When New York was legalized in 1970, they were able to travel there. Poor women, women of color, rural women, didn't have that luxury. They didn't have necessarily networks. They didn't have private physicians who were willing to break the law in their own offices. And so those were women that were disproportionately affected when abortion was illegal. And we see it today. We don't have to wait till Roe v. Wade is overturned to see that. It's certainly happening. All the restrictions that have been put in place, the hundreds of, potentially thousands of restrictions that have been put in place since 1973 has just made it really difficult for poor women to access abortion care. And, principally starting with the removal of public funding for abortion services and the prohibition of using public facilities for abortion care. That has affected disproportionately Black and brown women, and that certainly was the case pre-Roe v. Wade.
One of the things that struck me about the film was how much you centered it on the leadership of the particular individuals who were the Jains, like the not the leadership as a whole, but the leadership of the individuals who kind of played specific roles throughout the work that was being done, the building of the network, et cetera. Sometimes when people try to talk about issues like abortion, we hear a lot about the policy and the casework. We don't hear so much about the stories behind the stories, et cetera. What made you make a decision, Emma, to make this movie that way?
I mean, that's what this story is, and that's, I think it's power. These are ordinary women, extraordinary women, but, these aren't, or at least at that time, policymakers, people in government, what have you. These are capable, ethical human beings that have the courage and the wherewithal to put themselves on the line to take care of others and see that as a priority. And, it's funny, like they all sort of, when we ever called them heroes or spoke to them about how they're heroes, they all balk at that, because I think, that was really part of their understanding of the mission. That is, if you call us heroes, then people won't feel like they're capable of doing the same thing. We are not extraordinary. We are just able because everybody is able to take care of, their sisters and brothers. I just think that that's, I think that the Verite documentaries, that the the documentaries about policy making, about, governance, about all of those things are incredibly important. The story we had on our hands and we felt we were able to tell here was this one. And what made it extraordinary, is that these were citizens.
As I reflect on it, and as I was watching, I was thinking about, but my work as an activist has been largely focused on the rights of migrant women, many of whom are undocumented. And so one of the things that came across a number of times was his lack of access, sort of, the resources that people didn't have, and sort of the decision of like who can have an abortion and who can't and why. And we're seeing that today. This is a story that's continuing, right? And so I'm wondering, now that you've made this film, you've spent hours upon hours upon hours with the Janes, what worries you? You've talked a little bit about this, sort of like what could happen if things change with the law. But from a health and safety perspective, what is your foremost concern as you reflect on some of these interviews that you have conducted and what you've learned in the making of this film, Tia?
Well, we learned that there were septic wards all over the country in every major city where women who had either tried to self-induce an abortion or who had gotten poor care went. They were infected, they were injured, some of them were rendered infertile, many of them died. I mean, it's a life or death issue. And it's outrageous. I think that we're, going to start to see these wards pop up again in our cities and in our communities. We're seeing, right now we're seeing women from Texas, if they're able to travel to New Mexico to get abortions. The women in New Mexico are traveling to California because there are not enough clinics to serve these women. This was certainly true in the time of the Janes. Women were traveling all over from throughout Chicago to the South Side to avail themselves of the services of this group of women. But they also were coming from other Midwestern towns and communities. We found some women came from South Dakota, as far away as Iowa. Chicago became a bit of a sanctuary, or at least that what these women were providing was a sanctuary. And right now that's true as well, that women are coming to Chicago, they're going to New York, they're going to places in California because they've lost abortion clinics, because of the threats and because of the violence and because of the restrictions that are forcing clinics to close. So I guess that's a long-winded answer to say, when women don't have access to safe and affordable abortions, that doesn't mean they're going to carry the pregnancy to term. It means that they're, going to potentially risk their own lives to end the pregnancy. In that era, we heard stories of women using Lysol, to douche with Lysol to end the pregnancy, using pills that they got on the street, jumping from high places, doing great harm to themselves, or turning to unskilled, potentially unscrupulous practitioners who would charge a lot of money and also potentially assault them. This is not just, it's reproductive justice. It's about accessing basic medical care and about women making choices for our own bodies, people being able to make choices about their destinies, and some of the most intimate choices. Like, I've been able to make choices about whether and when to have a child, and that right should extend to every person, affected. And but instead we're seeing it slip away.
I appreciate the way the film did show the different decisions that people were making. I think the cards, in particular, there was a point where, I don't want to give it away, got to watch the film, everybody, but there was a particular point where we were hearing stories of some of the individuals who were making these tough decisions for a myriad of different reasons, all of them valid, right? And so I think I join you in the fear of what's to come, of what is possible, even of what we have seen over the last number of years as things have been eroding. And I think for all of us who care about these issues and who are doing this work, also, we need to hold on to hope, right? And your film gives me hope. And I would love to know from both of you, what gives you hope?
Again, I mean, it goes back to my other answer. It's like the courageous spirit of human beings, right? We do a lot of bad in this world, but we also do a lot of good. You know, talking to these women who have kept their eye on the prize as far as doing good in this world for so long, particularly when we were making this film in the middle of a healthcare crisis, in the middle of a pandemic, to be able to hear them talk about doing good in this world and seeing the good that they affected in this world, that's all we've got. That's it, period. Taking care of your fellow person, and I think that gives me hope. I mean, it's gotta keep us going. I think that that's always an option for us, is to take care of each other and do the right thing and have dialogue with each other and try to understand each other. And so to have a story, to be able to tell a story that is so rooted in all of those things, gives me a lot of hope.
What gives me hope, the vast majority of the American public is pro-choice. The vast majority. That gives me hope, because once those people speak, take to the streets, take to the airwaves, like make their voices heard, that they will be powerful. I think too many people have taken these rights for granted, but they need to speak, and hopefully this film and the courage of these women will help to facilitate that. I mean, I think also, like, people are organizing right now, all over the country, whether it's to raise money for women who can't afford to get abortion care but want it, and to help underwrite the procedure, whether it's to get abortion pills available through the mail, whether it's women in Mexico, where abortion was just decriminalized by their Supreme Court, coming across the border to help women in Texas. There's so much solidarity happening all around the country, and I think these networks are there. They continue. The Janes are not unique. They were unique at the time, but I think they're a model that people have adapted and adopted today.
Well, I have to say that your film, in my opinion, is a historic work of art. And I am grateful that you have captured the stories of these individuals, because they are the people who have made change, whose names not everyone will know. And I'm going to say it here, and let's put it, you put it into the universe, and you say here, your film should be in the Library of Congress. It is a piece of our history. And I hope that that happens one day. I'd love for you to share, what is your message to the viewers? What do you want them to do next?
I want them to pay attention, to watch the film, to take it in, to understand what this means. I mean, all of this stuff gets politicized, and lines get drawn, and people put on red hats, and they, and what's lost is, a 19-year-old girl that is going to the hospital to die from a botched abortion. I mean, it's just like, I feel like it's not even in the conversation when these things are talked about. So, I hope that this galvanizes people. I hope that, that people talk about this. And I hope that this makes people really put humanity back in these conversations, that there are real people that are truly affected by, all these arguments that we're having on a daily basis. I hope that this film can bring people, I don't even know if it's back to that point, but bring people there to have these conversations in that way.
There's so many groups right now that are working on the front lines of this issue for reproductive justice, reproductive health, abortion rights. And I hope that they find this film useful, in educating and in organizing and fundraising. I hope that the film becomes ancient history, like the story that we're telling becomes completely irrelevant, that our children and our grandchildren will, look at it and have, no fear about their rights, in the future. I guess look, you hope that people respond. They want to engage in conversation, first of all, that they want to talk about, what they saw on screen and how it relates to their lives and how it relates to people's lives all over the country and around the world. And then you hope they do something.
Well, thank you both so much. I can say on behalf of the Latinx House, we honor you, we celebrate you, we appreciate you, we are with you, and we will be telling everyone to watch this film and to take action. And at the end of this film, of our conversation and on our website, we will share information about how people can get involved to do just what you've asked us to do, to take action. Thank you both.
Thank you, Monica.
Thank you so much. Thanks for engaging in this conversation with us and for all that you do.
Thank you both.